Hello, this will be a video demonstration of how to create some timing and motion and slow in and slow out effects within animation in After Effects. In a couple previous videos I've created like a ball composition and a cube composition. Created a couple of simple animations of a ball bounce and then a cube bounce that discusses some of the major aspects of animating, especially in After Effects. So what I'm going to do is create a new composition here, and we're going to call this in timing and motion. There we go. And I'm going to drag my cube composition in here. This is just a simple cube or a square where the region is cropped down to the size of the square. So back in my timing and motion composition, I'm going to drag my cube in. And I'm going to move this one over to the right, or left, excuse me. And then I'm going to make a couple of copies so that way we can talk about how to adjust the timing to affect the overall motion of the cube as it's moving. So actually move it in here. So we're also going to talk about a couple other things like anticipation and then slowing in and out the motion as we get closer or further away from a keyframe. So with one cube layer, what I'm going to do first is keyframe my position to begin with, and we'll come back and add some other things. And actually, let me change my composition settings because I think I only have 20 frames. So let's just do 3 seconds just for a buffer here. There you go. Alright, so we have a 3-second timeline. Let's do 10 frames in. I have a keyframe on frame 0 for position. 10 frames in, I'm going to move it back. So this is going to be like an anticipation. My motion is really just going to be, the primary action is really going to be a motion from the left to the right. But to exaggerate that, we're also going to add a little bit of anticipation, which is the opposite direction. So it's going to first move backward, and then it's going to move forward. So maybe let's just try 1 second in. It's going to move all the way to the right side of the screen. So I'm holding down shift when I do that to keep a horizontal axis. Okay, so basically we have a quick anticipation, and it's going to move towards the right. And then let's let it settle for 5 frames. So 5 frames, it's going to settle back a little bit. There you go. So my motion looks like this so far. I might need to change my timing now. Let's take all of our frames beyond frame 0 and move them back, so maybe my anticipation is only 5 frames as well. Yep, so it's going a little further. That's okay. We'll correct that. And it's going a little further there, but we'll correct that. All right. So maybe we'll make our motion, actually let's keep it like that for right now. That'll be fun. All right, let's go into our graph. So this is the graph editor. And we're going to adjust the horizontal position, the x-axis. So we're going to right click and choose separate dimensions. And we got some overshooting going on. That's why it goes out of frame. So this part is out of frame because if I look at it, it's overshooting that action there. Okay, so there's no keyframe there, but it's trying to create motion. So let's just look at the position X, and we'll drag select all of our keyframes. Then we're going to do an ease in and an ease out. That should correct all overshooting there. So let's go back and play. That gets rid of that overshooting. I'm just scaling in and out of my timeline, or zooming in and out. But we can exaggerate this a little further, so we can take our ins and outs and drag them out horizontally. And for these middle ones, I want to just do a linear for right now. So actually, let's just do a linear for everything, and we'll look at the difference between these. So we'll do linear, 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 and linear for all 4. There you go. So basically, just going to pop in between those keyframes. Let me zoom out, and I'm going to scale in my workspace. It's this bar right here. I'm going to drag select. I'm going to drag on that so that it's only going to play back this 1 second motion. Actually, let me get out of my graph. There you go. So it's just going to play back that 1 second motion. All right, so this is linear tangents. If I go back to my graph, that means it's going to have constant velocity between the start to the back position or the anticipation. Here's our follow through, and then it's going to settle back. So what we really created here is kind of a full take of our animation. So the full take or action incorporates an anticipation. It's going backwards. The follow through is the middle section of the horizontal motion going towards the right. And then the settle is secondary action. So that's what we reference as calling an animation take. Anticipation, follow through, overlapping action is a blending of the motion in between these major poses. And then the secondary action is the settling action, going back, kind of settling back. I might add a couple of frames after this just so that I have time to visualize that box stopping. There you go. So adding a couple more frames, if I drag this back and now play, I don't really give the audience an opportunity to see that settle. So instead, let's add a couple more frames to the end. Now I can understand that settle a little more. You could also add a couple frames to the beginning as well, but this is okay to begin with. All right, so this is linear tangents, which means the way the curve goes in and out of the keyframes. And that's a constant velocity. What I want to show was a couple of different ways we can adjust the timing, which is the way the curves move in and out of these keyframes, and that drastically changes how that motion looks. So let's get out of our graph editor, and I'm going to pause my animation. I'm going to take my cube, and I'm going to hit Control-C, Control-V to make a copy. And this one, actually before I do that, let's go delete the keyframes for, before I do that, let's go into transform. Let's delete the keyframes for Y position. I don't need those. So I'm just going to delete those out. There you go. So I still have my horizontal motion, but there's no Y position keyframes. There you go. So now when I Control-C and Control-V to copy and paste, the two cubes are on top of one another. If I take the second cube and move it up above that, and now if I hit play, it keeps the horizontal motion, but because there's no keyframe anymore on the Y position, I can move the Y position around wherever I want. So what I wanted to show you was a couple of different ways to do this, and let's see, it's Control-Z, Control-V again, and I'm going to move this third one down to the bottom. There you go. So I have 3 cubes. They're doing the same exact thing. All 3 have linear tangents, which means their motion is all going to be constant between our anticipation going backwards, our follow through going forwards, overlapping action blending, and then settle moving backwards again. All right, so there's my middle one. I'm going to find my top one. So I'm going to leave the top line as linear tangents. If I go back to my graph, open up my transform, position X, it's linear tangent, and that was when we select keyframes and click this button right here, convert selected keyframes to linear, constant velocity. Okay. So that's kind of a constant velocity. We'll keep that one as default throughout the motion here. All right, so the next one, X position, and we're just going to affect how the follow through works right now. If I go to the X position on my second cube, I want to change my keyframes for the 2 middle ones, the start and end of the follow through. So let's change these to ease, ease in, and ease, ease out. There you go. Let's just play. Look at the difference between the top cube and the bottom one, and the middle one, sorry. Bottom one isn't going to change. Well, the motion has changed drastically already. They still start and end at the same position, but the timing is different. So whereas the top cube has a constant velocity, see they all start at the same and they all end at the same, but what happens to them in between that is a lot different. The top cube has constant velocity. It doesn't change its speed over time. The middle cube, if I look at my curve, a more horizontal curve means it's slower. A more vertical curve means it's faster. So as the curve suggests, the first cube starts off slower. It's going to be faster in the middle, and then it's going to end slower. So put spacebar again to play. That feels a lot different. The timing is a lot different. And we adjust that not with more keyframes if we can, but by adjusting the way the curve looks. The motion feels differently, although they have the same exact points. So they still start and end the motion at the same exact points, they just have different timing. Now we can exaggerate this further. So with this one, I'm going to take the position X and this first keyframe where starts the forward motion. I'm going to drag this so it's fast, leaving that. It's going to be about the same speed as the top cube. So it's going to be fast, a more vertical curve. And then as it reaches this end point of the horizontal motion, I want it to slow down further. So I'm going to drag the end tangent here, or the ease in, further towards the left. Like that. All right, now let's watch that. You see how that changes it even further. The top cube still has linear constant velocity. The middle cube now has faster motion to begin with, so it actually is taking off even faster than the first cube. It gets further along the horizontal line quicker, and then it's going to start to slow down. So if I zoom in here, I don't know if you can see the dots, but in between here, it's going to create horizontal dots on my curve visually that suggest the timing as well. So if these dots, there's one, there's one, there's one, there's another one. If the dots are further spaced apart, then that motion is faster. If the dots, like they're over here on the right side, if the dots are closer together, there's more dots packed together here, that means the motion is slower. So visually in my composition, I can also see this taking place as well. So this middle cube reaches like 75% down the motion faster, but then slows down at the end. So that's what's called a fast out of that keyframe, and then a slow into the next keyframe. So we're using the principles of animation called slow in and slow out. Whereas the top cube has constant velocity. There's no slow in, slow out. I'll look at the curve of the top cube, constant velocity. There's no change in the slope there. All right. So top cube, constant velocity. Middle cube is going to have a slow out of the first position, or sorry, a fast out of the first position, and slow into the second position. And we're going to do the opposite for the bottom cube. So let's go down to our bottom cube and open that up. We'll go to transform, position X. So this one we're going to go back and we're going to change this, all the keyframes again, to ease in and ease out. Does this have a keyframe in the middle? Looks like it does there. Somehow we got another keyframe in here. That's all right. Other keyframes can always be deleted by selecting them in the graph editor and hit the delete key. There we go. That'll smooth everything back out. All right, so if I look at this again, this is now different even from the top one. This is a slow in and slow out. So if I do a slow in and slow out, I can exaggerate this further by dragging in my corner points. There we go. So that'll be slow as it leaves and slow as it enters the next keyframe. What we want to do here is a slow out of the first keyframe and a fast in to the third keyframe. So we're going to do a slow out for the first keyframe. So we're really going to drag the out tangent, or the ease out, further towards the right for this keyframe. And we'll come over here to this one, and then this one's going to be a linear. So I want to drag it in so it's not as exaggerated, and then point it down more. And let's go back and play. Now watch the difference now with the third cube. Alright, so it's much slower to begin with, and much faster in the end. Now once again, each of these three cubes is starting from the same exact position, right there, and ending in the same exact position. But the motion feels a lot different because of the way the curves are edited and the blending of that motion. So those are just some major ways to adjust the timing to affect how the motion looks. And what we're really adjusting is what's called slow in and slow out. Or in digital terms, tangents of how the curve looks as it enters and exits a keyframe. So on the left side of a keyframe, that's the in tangent, or the slow or fast in. On the right side of the keyframe, that's the out tangent, or the slow or fast out. So if a curve is more horizontal as it exits a keyframe, that means it's a slow out. If the curve is more horizontal as it enters a keyframe, that's called a slow in. If a curve is faster or more vertical as it reaches or goes into a keyframe, that's called a fast in. If I go back up to the one above that, this keyframe right here, the middle one, middle cube, if the curve is more vertical as it reaches out of a keyframe, that's a slow out. So these are subtle ways to adjust the timing to really drastically change the way the motion looks. Now we're really exaggerating each one of these cubes as they're moving and animating the same exact positions, but adjusting the way they go in and out of these different poses. All right, one last thing we can do here is kind of add some more further exaggeration, and we can do that with the scale animation. So each one of these, let's go up to the top one, and we're going to turn off the graph editor and turn on the scale. And actually I'm going to do this, I don't want it to scale as it's anticipating or anticipating. So let's go to the part where it's moving towards the left, the second keyframe. We're going to click the stopwatch, and that's 100 and 100 for scale. And then somewhere halfway in between, I'm going to visually scale this out. Here you go, so it stretches it out. All right, and then what I'm going to do is at the last part of the keyframe, the settle, I'm going to put it back to 100. Okay. Well, I think it actually, yeah, it kept this. So let's turn off the constrain button. So then at the end, it's going to be 100 and 100. There you go. So it's just going to scale horizontally. There you go. So now it looks like it's kind of stretching at this going in there. Let's do the same thing for our other two. So let's go down. Let's turn a stopwatch on frame 5. Let's see, what was the frame I had earlier? 18. Stretch this one out some. Let's just do 200 to keep everything simple. 200 by 100. And at the very end, we're going to do 100 by 100. Okay, we'll pop this one back to 200 here as well. There we go. So we keep everything the same. All right, let's go down to our last one. Keyframe the scale there. Let's move it in there. And we're going to do 200 here. 200 by 100. At the very end, we're going to put it back to 100. Okay. Now, that's the same exact scale, same exact timing and scale, but now they look a lot different because of the timing, right? They're scaling at different times. Really, it's scaling at the same time, but due to the timing of the motion, they look a lot different. Right, one final thing we can do is actually just add motion blur. So let's turn on the motion blur for the overall timeline. That's this button right here. And then we're going to turn on motion blur for each individual layer. So let's turn on the motion blur for cube 1, the second cube, and the third cube. Here we go. So now when I hit play, we can really start to see that exaggeration happening now with the motion. We've exaggerated the motion blur and squash and stretch. Different points. Some of them are more blurry than others because of the faster motion. So the middle cube is blurring faster to begin with. Then the top cube blurs more. Then the bottom cube blurs. That's because the middle cube is faster to begin with. Then the top cube is faster. Then the bottom cube is faster. So there's some subtle ways to adjust the timing to drastically change the way the motion works. All right, that'll wrap up this video talking about timing in motion, slow in and slow out, and we even talked about exaggeration here.